Sam. Yep.
You're in.
Ari, you lovely lot, and welcome back to NE1's Mental Health Podcast with me, Ray Elliott, and a rather snotty Sam Warner. How are you doing, Sam?
I've been better, but I can't complain, Ray. I can't complain. I think I feel like a lot of people at the moment, just a bit groggy coming out the back end of it, but pleased to be here to take part in this chat today. Really exciting.
But the Suns, the Toon are now long-awaited champions, which is lifting everyone's spirits, I think, even though you're an adopted Geordie.
Oh, it's insane. It's how infectious it is and how much it means to people. We've just been talking about me being an outsider, haven't we? And yeah, it's insane. It's pure meaning, happiness, connection, all of those things. It's mint.
Awesome. So we haven't had a podcast for February because work and life and being a parent and just being a human being and trying to be present and everything else just seemed to get
ill. If I'm not ill, my wife's ill, then we're passing it around the house.
Yeah, the joys, this time of year, innit? Yeah. But we're back today, and we're back with an amazing guest, and it's been a long-awaited guest because I've been trying to get you on, Christine, for the last year. In fact, I think it was the first podcast I wanted to get you on, but talking about work and family and everything else, you're probably the busiest person I know.
Quite possibly. Quite possibly. I do have a really hectic home life.
So I could try and sum up the many, many hats you wear. So you're a mother, you're a charity founder, you're an OCD awareness advocate.
Yeah.
Fill me in on any of the blanks. There's, you're now in a school.
Yeah. I also have the Life of Reilly community interest company, which is all about educating about autism, and that does a really good job at kind of teaching mainstream pupils in schools about autism and why some of their classmates might be a little bit different and how we should just be a bit more accepting. So we have that. My son Riley's 14 this year.
Gosh, 14.
14, yeah. He's taller than me. He's huge. He's out of school now. So that adds an extra pressure at home because, well, it kind of an extra pressure, but not because he's happier not in school. So it's better, but it just means I have less time. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell. The charity North East Hearts with Goals places defibrillators around the northeast. There's over 50 people being saved now with the machines. So that's really incredibly busy as well. So I don't have a lot of spare time on my hands.
And we'll talk a little bit about where that was born from, but to give a bit of context about how we know each other. So you are married to a good friend of mine, grew up in the same village, same area, and talking about little Riley, I met him when he was in a pram.
Yeah.
And, I've seen pictures now and he's...
Yeah.
Gosh, how tall is he?
He's 5'11" now.
Wow. So. Yeah, so that just seems to happen in a blink of an eye.
Yeah.
But what I love about what you've done is, and we'll talk about the North East Hearts with Goals charity as well. You've went through some difficult experiences and you've tried to make some good out of it.
Yeah.
And I think there's some huge messages to be taken from that for everyone.
Yeah.
Because there's always going to be things and challenges in life that we experience, but it's trying to see the positive or making a positive out of it. And I think that's something you've done incredibly well.
I think it's something, for me, it's a little bit selfish because, yes, like me and Kelly set the charity up and it does great things. The Life of Reilly does great things. But I need to do great things.
Yeah. It's cathartic, isn't it, as well? It's
cathartic. I need to do it. It makes me happier. It brings me peace as well as benefiting other people.
Yeah, but if everybody worked on that premise, regardless if there was some sort of benefit. I mean, the work we do, we go out and we talk about our lived experience and try to encourage people talking.
Yeah.
Absolutely, we want to help people. But there is absolutely that benefit that comes to us as well. That feeling you get when somebody comes to you and goes, do you know what, I've never spoken about this, but I'm really struggling. And you can go, well, we can get you through to somebody that can help you with that. Yeah,
and also the feeling of somebody truly getting what you're going through. I mean, the conversation that me and you had that day, we were arranging to meet to
Yeah.
do with defibrillators. I don't know if you
That's
can
right,
remember.
yeah.
And you said to me, I've got something on. Oh, you wouldn't understand. You wouldn't get it. Well, actually, I really, really understand, and I do truly get it. And that feeling is just, it's priceless.
Yeah.
So that thing we were talking about here, and this is why I'm super buzzing to have you on, because it's something that I really need to talk about. But even through the work I do is something I don't actually use as part of the talks, because I still find it incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
And that thing is pure OCD. And we, like you say, I was putting on some wellbeing events in a previous employment, and you were going to come along with Northeast Hearts with Goals and do some defibrillator training, some CPR awareness and whatnot. And I was in a really stressful place. And I think you just said, how are you doing? And I was like, well, yeah, I mean, you wouldn't understand, but OCD's been pretty bad lately. And you were like, I remember there just being a pause, and I was thinking, oh God, what you going to think here? And you were like, how does your OCD manifest? And I was like, well, not how you'd think it would be, like, you want to see me house, I'm not some, it's not super tidy. I don't have to have the baked bean tins looking a certain way, but it's like all manifestations in my head. And you were like, pure OCD, and I was just like, oh my gosh. And she was like, I experiencing that too.
Yeah.
And I say I experience it, right? And I use that for some mental health terms, but I'm not going to use that, because I'm going to say struggle with OCD, because I'm not going to sugarcoat it.
No.
It's fucking horrific.
Horrific, it is.
It's absolutely horrific, and it's super, super misunderstood.
And nobody talks about it.
And no one and the reason no one talks about it, and I can say this with some conviction, is because of the shame, the guilt, that fear of judgment. What are people going to think of me? Because typically it goes against everything you're about.
That's its nature. OCD's nature is to get stuck into everything you care about.
Yeah.
And that's the most difficult part about it, I think.
I've heard people refer to it as the bully.
Yeah.
And that's how it feels for me. Because I feel like it robs me of some really precious things in life. When I look back, some of those, and even now, like yesterday, I had a really bad day with it, right?
Yeah.
And it was because I was really tired. I'd had a big week, I had a lot going on, and coming back from being away for a week doing talks and come back into the family environment with the kids, and they're all over you.
Yeah.
Like, it seems to start then.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really struggling with it. The kids are on my knee, just having a bit of a cuddle, and like, I'm having all these like really horrible, graphic, intrusive thoughts.
Yeah.
And I've done a lot of work. We've talked about this. There's the specialist therapy you can do for it called ERP, so exposure response prevention therapy, and it's really sort of niche to that, to pure OCD. And I've done a lot of work, but still, it's really uncomfortable, and it makes you, and I'm just like, oh, here it comes again, robbing us of these lovely moments in life that I should just be sitting here enjoying. And I say, and full well, what it's like. It's awful. But do you want to give a little bit more context into what OCD is for anyone that might be listening that might not understand it?
As somebody who doesn't understand it, probably I know it peripherally, like the culture tells you, like you said, tidiness, washing hands, a kind of superficial version of it. But obviously, talking to Ray over the years and understanding, I wonder how many people actually do struggle with it. I bet it's more than we think.
I think when I first started to talk about OCD, so I write a blog called The Life of Reilly, and in that, it's a really honest account of how we live, but sometimes I cover the mental health side of things. So it's kind of, I call it me mental threesome. So that is depression, anxiety, OCD, even though OCD is like anxiety times 80 billion. That's what it is.
Well, it's an anxiety disorder,
it
isn't it? That's how
So for me, when I think back, because I often think back and when did it start? Is there a defining moment when it started? And for me, that isn't.
Right.
But I can tell you, I had a brother, which is who I set the charity up in memory of with Kelly. And I can remember being really young and thinking, if I flush the toilet and I'm not back in bed within by the time the noise stops, then something horrific's going to happen.
Right.
And that's not like, and I used to meet, like, Neil would take the mick out of us for it and go, it's ridiculous and all the rest of it. But I think that was the start of it, like putting pressure on myself that if this doesn't happen, then something horrific's going to happen. So you're constantly trying to counteract it. And then I think it really came to surface after I had my first child. So then it's classed as like perinatal OCD. But to be honest, it's OCD. And I don't know anyone who's had perinatal OCD where it's just kind of fell away, you know.
Yeah.
Like you now have this precious little human that you would do absolutely everything for, and you're terrified to be the parent of this child because you don't know, are you worthy? Can you look after them properly? Because OCD truly can make you feel like a monster. And I can't, it's kind of the opposite of everything that I am. Is what pure OCD is. And a lot of people talk about OCD. I've got friends who say I've got OCD. You haven't got OCD, mate. Yeah. Like you like your house tidy. That's all that is. You might get a bit anxious because it's not tidy and it makes you feel a little bit unsettled. But are you actually thinking that something horrific is going to happen to a family member because those tins aren't aligned properly?
Yeah. And there's so many crossovers with what you've just said with how my OCD present itself, and I think there's, when I started doing the therapy and the work, there is one sort of, maybe not when it started, but one definitive memory that I've got from being a child. Mm-hmm. So when I was 6, things at home were quite difficult. My mum was sort of in the grips of like alcohol addiction, and she had undiagnosed bipolar disorder, and she self-medicated with alcohol, but we didn't know that at the time. You know, it wasn't, mental health isn't in a place where it's at, you know, awareness and whatnot. So had a big impact on the family, and there was other factors, don't get us wrong, but like my mum and dad's relationship was on the rocks. They were breaking up at the time. Yeah. And there was a lot of like the mania side for my mum, where she would go out and do things and wouldn't come home, and you know that caused a big strain. And I remember when I was doing the ERP, we tried to go back to remember when those thoughts first started. And I remember one particular incident. I was 6 years old. I was at Fordley School, and I'd been dropped off by my mum. And every mum that came through the gates with the kids, I just had this non-stop voice saying, I wish she was my mum. I wish she was my mum. I wish she was my mum. And I couldn't switch it off. And I remember being on the ground crying. And I was just in so much distress because I'm thinking, what? And anyway, they called my mum up and she took me home. And I remember my mum sitting with us, and she was like, well, what was it all about? And I said, look, it's just this constant like thought in my head that I wish she was my mum, wish she was my mum. And I remember her saying to me at the time, like getting, you know, losing her temper, saying, well, do you want another mum? Yeah. And I was like, no, and, you know, crying my eyes out, trying to understand. And I think it was at that point when I realised, you know, don't talk about these things. Yeah. That was for me. It's going to upset people. Yeah, this is going to upset people, and it's upsetting you. So that was it. I just didn't talk about it. And that's probably my earliest memory. And having done a lot of research and whatnot, there often can be like a trigger where people start on noticing the thoughts more. Yeah. Like a life event or a trauma. But like you say, maybe them thoughts were there. Maybe that was the way my brain was wired anyway, and it was always going to happen. But that event where my parents broke up at such a young age, maybe that was like the catalyst for things to start. And exactly what you're saying about those rituals. At night, I would have this like sort of circuit in my room that I would have to do, and then I would get in bed. If I hadn't done it perfectly, I'd have to go and do it again, because in my head, like something terrible was going to happen, or like I remember thinking, oh, if I do this, maybe, you know, things will work out with my parents, because I think I sort of blame myself for that a little bit. And you know, this isn't negative on them; just these things happen in life, don't they? You know, like but it did have a big bearing on me. And how I actually got diagnosed was when I was expecting my first child. So I'd bought a house, I'd got a new job, she was expecting, and just there was a lot going on. I was doing a lot in the house, and I was stressed and I was tired, and the thoughts just become unbearable. And of course I didn't talk to anyone because
no one's going to understand.
And I was the shame and the guilt as well, because I didn't want to say to my partner at the time, I'm having these thoughts. She'd be like, in my head I thought, gosh, he'll think I'm a monster. I'm horrific. So I kept it in, and how I found out was actually by accident, right? So I was watching a show called Pure. I don't know if you've seen it.
I have, yeah.
Yeah. So I think the lady's name, she's an author, Rose Bretishare, I believe her name is.
Yeah.
And she wrote the book Pure, and then it turned into a series. And I was struggling this one day, and I'd been to just lie in the room just to try and get some peace. And then we sat down, this show just came on, and I'm not kidding you, I must have been watching it for about a minute and a half, and I just, like, when you just get overcome.
Yeah, light bulb moment.
And Harriet looked at me, and she was like, because she's like, oh my God, like, just for the layman watching it must have been like, what is going on with this girl? And I was like, this is how my brain works. Yeah. And it was almost light bulb, like, oh. And I remember the next day I rang the doctors and I was like, listen, I think I need to speak to somebody about OCD. Yeah. And luckily for me, I ended up sitting down with the doctor, and they were like, look, we've got one person who specialises in ERP in Northumberland we can put you in touch with. And I sat down with him and I thought, right, this is it. I've got to open up. And I spoke for about 5 minutes, and he just said to us, you have 1000% got OCD, pure OCD. Yeah. And I remember just bursting into tears. And I couldn't stop the tears. And I remember the first thing I said to him, because I've ended up in a crisis situation through OCD thoughts, right? And I said to him, how many people do you think have died because of this? And he just said, I think the number's untold. I
would hate to imagine. I've said this to you before, like, if somebody takes their own life and people genuinely can't work out a reason, why did that happen? Why would this person do that? I often think, did they have OCD and it just became that unbearable?
Yeah, God, yeah.
Because that's how harsh it is, and that's how it's torturous, isn't it?
Yeah. To give people an understanding, right? So some people experiencing OCD, like for example, on that show Pure, that Rose, hers was all sexual. Yes. So she would picture people naked and doing like obscene, graphic sexual acts, like on the tube. Yeah,
just randomly.
Yeah. But
family party.
Yeah, or people can have themes around violence or various themes. For me, right, I don't have a theme. It just can
anything goes.
It can be anything.
Yeah,
and like it just pops in. I'm like, where does that come from?
Yeah.
And but it's so distressing because they can be so vivid and so graphic and so horrible, and it tends to be about the things you care about the most.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's why it's called The Bully.
Yeah.
I can remember asking you, Ray, just thinking about the listeners here and sort of me being somebody who isn't that understood. When you say, when we're having these thoughts, you've explained it to me in the past where I think we probably all have bizarre moments of thought, don't we, where we have these chains of images come through our minds. Yeah. When you were saying that there about that girl in the show, I remember being sat in the exam hall on a roasting August afternoon, single desks in the 90s doing exams, and I can remember this thought coming in my mind because I'd finished the exam of like, God, imagine the smell in this room if everybody was just naked sat at these desks in this room. And I was thinking about it. I was thinking, well, that's mad. And then I started thinking about the girls and the boys. And I was thinking about all the testicles sat on and it was all coming through my head. And I was like, but as you've explained it to me in the past, is I think that can be a normal thing that can just come through. And somebody who might be suffering with pure OCD, like, you take that thought and you drill down into it and it just keeps going and turning into more and more, where the rest of us are kind of go, well, wow, that's a bit mad. And
it's the attachment. Yeah.
That's exactly what it is. You can't.
So it's it's the attachment, and then that becomes the problem. So you've got the obsessions, and then you've got the compulsions that go with it. So for people with pure OCD, where they're having thoughts, they might end up with mental rituals to try and combat them. Various things like words that constantly repeat in their head, songs, or, things that they visualize.
Mine's telemetries, nothing ever happens. I swear that's my, because nothing's going to happen. Absolutely nothing's going to happen other than me being completely stressed out and anxious.
And that's the other thing, like, you know, that in that, because intrusive thoughts are just a part of everyone's brain.
I think that's the thing I'm trying to get across there to people. When you're driving the car and you just think, oh, could I just...
Yeah.
And then you don't really think nothing of it.
Yeah.
But when you attach something, you know, that and give it that meaning, and you sort of feed it, and then it just becomes this beast where
you're unable to let go. It just grows,
and then they just come and you can't. Yeah.
So I've got friends who've said that, like, they've been driving the car and I've got people who don't want to pass the driving test because they've had thoughts, but what if I purposely go off the road? Loads of people have them thoughts, but it's like I said, do you then go home and start thinking, well, why did I think that? Did I think that because that's possibly something that I really do want to do? It's absolutely not. But it's the attachment, and it's like a video getting stuck in a loop, and it just continues to play until it finds the next thing, and then it'll move on to the next one.
Is it that constant for you then, Christine? Does it feel like one thought moves into another? And at this stage in your life, because you mentioned after your first son, I think before the podcast said he's 28.
Yeah.
So have you found, obviously you've got tools and mechanisms in to cope now, but is the intensity still the same when it comes as it was from those early days?
Absolutely. It's just as strong. It's so frightening. But now that I'm better equipped to deal with it, I can kind of smooth it out a bit better, but it's utterly debilitating. That's why I'm as busy as what I am, because if I keep busy, it's distraction, isn't it? Distraction's key with the OCD, I think.
Problem with that is you end up burnt out, which I've experienced, and you're stressed, and then stress makes OCD worse, and tired. So the things that make my OCD worse that I've realised is stress, 100%, sleep. Yep. If I'm dieting, and weirdly, if I train too much and diet too much, it gets worse. You know, you'd think it would get better. Like there's definitely a happy medium for me where I'm eating quite well, but you know, once I start being quite restrictive or I'm training a lot, the OCD gets worse. And a few other certain environments and whatnot can be triggering, but. And another thing that I found strange after that, seeing that show and then getting therapy, and I had to open up a bit with my partner. So talking to triggers, this is why I never watch horror movies, right? So
same.
Yeah.
Don't watch them. Never have.
And it's like an avoidance thing, because if it's not in there, I suppose it can't manifest as a thought.
You don't need new ones.
I don't need any more graphic stuff. But it was so bad for me. I remember I was walking past, when I was in London, I was walking past a news stall and I seen the front of a newspaper, and it said, man stabs girlfriend in eye with screwdriver. That's all.
God,
so I didn't even read the story, right?
Yeah.
And then I went on my merry way. I was in a really stressful environment, job, etc. And then that was it. Hide all the screwdrivers in the house, any tools, because that as soon as I seen something like that I would just have this horrible graphic thought I was going to do that. But then you see what's attached to that, because you then start thinking, am I as horrible as that person that's in the paper? Could I do that? Am I a murderer?
Yeah.
And then that's where it increases the anxiety, but the opinion on yourself, and that depression, like that's really difficult, because I've hated myself for a long time before I had the diagnosis, thinking I am the most despicable person in the world because I can have these thoughts. Like, how could anybody even have these thoughts? Not realizing it's just a thought. I didn't want them to come.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I don't want them to be there.
But it's the what ifs, isn't it? It's everything about OCD is what if. What if I did this? What if I did that?
Yeah.
And you're not going to do any of them. I don't know anyone with OCD who's ever done anything horrible. Yeah. It's just kind of what if, and it's those what ifs that are really so tiring and so it's exhausting having OCD.
That's the feeling that I can imagine. Just especially, you're 28, 30 years into like this experience, this ritual that comes, and even though you've got mechanisms and a coping strategy now, you're kind of back at the beginning of that loop. You go, right, I've got to do this. I've got to do it. Like that over time. I think must be draining.
Back then as well, I didn't know I had OCD.
Right.
Because I remember getting a computer. We didn't have the internet and stuff like that. It sounds like I'm from the Victorian ages. But we got a computer, and it was while I was pregnant, and I can remember thinking, what if I looked for something that I don't want to look at?
Yeah.
Like that's classic OCD.
Everybody, I would imagine most people have had that. You know, you get
it's a genuine fear when the internet came out. What if I click on the wrong thing?
Yeah.
But then it's like, so why did I actually think that in the first place? It's just relentless. So I went for years without knowing that it was OCD until I came across a group online and thought, this is all me. Everything that these people are talking about is everything that I'm feeling. Because I think as well, like I have a health OCD, so I've spent, and to be honest, and some of my friends, I need them to actually pull us up on it because I could really spiral. I mean, I've spent 3 hours before trying to take a photograph of a mole on my back, knowing that it's a mole on my back, but convinced, and then I'll download apps to have a look to see, you know, like these mole screeners. They're probably, whether they work or not, I don't know. But I would download them. I'd join groups on Facebook for people who've got skin cancer, and like that's how bad it is. Like,
but you've got this supercomputer in your pocket now.
Yeah, well, exactly.
I mean, there's nothing worse than Dr. Google
as well, isn't it? It's just saying, isn't it? Like, come in and explore.
It is, and that's the thing with OCD. You're constantly looking for reassurance that that's not you as a person. But I think, to be honest, that's kind of all of the advice you'll be given. You'll have been given the same, is to stop looking for reassurance. Like, it's just a thought. You need to let it, or try and let it go without digging into reassurance.
Then. So is there any science research that points to what is this? What is this an experience? Is it a chemical thing? Is it something that is in the brain chemistry? Is it what is a causal sort of makeup of it?
I think it's not, there's not an exact science to it.
Is there people that you've come across in your journeys that have experienced it and then no longer experience it, move through it, past it? I no longer experience that. That would be interesting to know.
There's people out there that, you know, that'll state recovery is 100% possible, and I'll be honest, I'm in such a better place than I was.
Yeah.
But the thoughts will come.
Yeah.
It's almost like how my brain's hardwired.
Yeah. You just deal with it better.
So for me, recovery, and this is I think akin to many disorders, say, you know, bipolar, or it could be psychosis and whatnot, you know. It might be sort of present, but you've got coping strategies, and it's not as sort of impactful and debilitating in your life. For me, how I'm in a headspace now where even though they can come and they can be really, really horrible and uncomfortable, my immediate thought now is, where it used to be like, oh my God, I'm the worst person in the world. Am I capable of doing this? And then the pattern's gone. I'm off the edge of a cliff for months. They'll come and I'll go, right, why is this coming? And I'm like, this is an intrusive thought. What's going on? And I'll sit down with my wife and I'll say, look, my OCD's bad at the minute, and she'll sit down with us and she'll go, right, what's work like at the minute? Have you got a lot on? Is there stuff outstanding that you haven't dealt with? Sleep, how are you sleeping? And then normally it's like shit, because we've got 2 young kids that wake up at all times, you know. And then, you know, how am I eating? Am I exercising? Da-dee-da-dee-da. Is anything that's triggered it, you know? And I go through that process, and 9 times out of 10 there's something that is triggering it for me. Like I say, like weather, seasons. Winter, my OCD is way worse.
Absolutely.
Starts kicking in about Halloween.
Because Halloween is one of the biggest triggers.
And that's the other thing. Like Halloween, I used to hate Halloween, and all these movies coming on, and everything's like horror, and I'm just like, oh, here we go. I'll tell you another one that I can sort of laugh about it now. You're probably in a position where you can find some humour in them, but at the time it was horrific. Do you know House of Cards with Kevin Spacey?
I do know it, but I haven't seen it.
So I was watching that, and there's an episode where he meets this girl down in the subway and he kicks her in front of a train, right?
Oh, yeah.
I was living in London at the time and I was
no.
travelling every day by tube, right? Can you imagine?
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
You cheating yourself to
the minute I open my eyes, I know I'm going to the tube, so that's all I can think about, right? Then I get to the tube, and it got to the point where I'd have to like restrain myself on the seat, or I would have to wait outside, like on the stairs, till I knew my tube was coming, and then just like literally run down as the doors were open.
This is fascinating
because those thoughts about me kicking somebody in front of that train was so unbearable, and I'm thinking. And I didn't know at the time I had OCD, and I'm just like, am I capable of this? Am I a murderer? Am I the most horrible person? And then I'm sort of seeing the headlines in the paper and all that.
Oh, God, yeah.
And it's just like, I was never going to do that.
No, never.
I had no intention of doing that.
Because it's the opposite of what
it's
you are.
It's opposite of what my values are, I would never, ever want to hurt somebody or do anything like that. But yeah, I look back on it now and I think, fucking House of Cards.
House of Cards.
Jesus.
I think for me, there's been times like I go away with the girls. That's every year I go away for a few days because life at home is really stressful. And I must admit, when I'm away, I'm much better. I am much better because I haven't got that stress going on. At home, I don't get any sleep because Reilly doesn't sleep. He's medicated for sleep, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I can remember the conversation of like one of the girls saying, "I don't want to be on a really high up floor because what if I jump?"
Yeah, that's got to be a common thought.
Common thought,
for the layman who, up from the Eiffel Tower or whatever, and thought, "Oh God,
what if I jump?"
We all have that, like, oh,
yeah,
oh yeah, that's a yeah.
And I just said, "But what if I pushed?"
Yeah.
And you've got to put the humour in there because you know it's ridiculous.
So do they know about the OCD?
Oh, absolutely,
So
absolutely. Like they know about. I mean, my health OCD is the one that they kind of ribbers for the most. But I need them to do that because if they don't do that, I will truly go down that hole, and it's hard to get yourself back out.
Like that dark humour. There's a place for it in the world, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely.
For a lot of things.
Yeah. So, but I think what me and you talked about was the first time that I connected with somebody who truly got it, and she won't mind us mentioning it, was Anna Foster, who she tweeted something about OCD. And she's
she's a BBC Newcastle radio presenter, yeah?
She tweeted something about OCD, and I thought, like, that's the first person that I know who is openly talking about how she feels about OCD. And I sent her a DM, and that was it. Like, we met for lunch, we talked about everything. Like, was making jokes like, God, if somebody sitting around was listening to the conversation here, like, there's some headlines for you. And she was the first person that I actually had a face-to-face conversation about OCD, but
normalising it.
Normalising it.
Really
strange because you've lived with that for so long. Same with me. That guilty secret. That's all. It's what it's like, isn't it? It's like this horrible, like, and then somebody just goes, "Oh yeah, mate, I get that." And what about this? You ever had this thought? And then you just, and it's so twisted sometimes the conversation, but then you start laughing. You're just like, yeah, I've had that one about stabbing a dog, and
because it's ridiculous.
Yeah,
I would imagine people listening to this of all walks of life. There'd be people in vans now, people in the gym, people on the everybody, I think, on some level is having the bonkers thoughts. You walk in the gym and everybody's there, and you see the pretty girl who's strong on the bars, or you see the big lad who's humping stuff about, or you see that the guy who kind of, you think, and he's homeless, but he's always in this gym, and and you go through all these mad thoughts, and you live out people's lives. And like I said, that one I picked out of the hat for me in the exam room, I remember thinking that in that exam room, and I've had many thoughts like that. When I used to go out partying, I've had strange thoughts about there's only me and him left in this party. When I was a young raver and a bloody lunatic, and I've had the intrusive thought of him coming in my room and trying it on with me, and I've gone through that, and I've gone through the thing in my head of it happening in my head, and me pushing the thought out of my head, and then it coming back in, like, just totally.
But they're like fleeting moments, for a lot of people.
And that's what's interesting, where I think that's the difference. I think a lot of people will hear these thoughts and go, God, yeah, well, I've thought that, but then it comes and it goes,
and you don't attach anything to it. You don't think that you're a terrible person for it. You don't think there's going to be any consequences.
That's the difference.
And that's
kind of subliminally know it's just passing through your mind, whereas listening to you guys talk, it just sounds like it just clamps onto you, like your main focus and attention awareness is like harnessed in this mad thought.
And like I say, that's why it upsets me, is because it robs us of a lot of things, you know, precious moments that should be beautiful, where you're on holiday with your family and the kids are playing in the pool, and you're just like, this is a moment where you look around and everyone's just sat in that moment, and I'm just fucking riddled with these horrific thoughts.
But then do you ever think, is everybody really sat there in that moment?
True.
Yeah, that's the point.
You don't know that the person sitting opposite you is not like... Because once I started talking about OCD, I have a couple of cousins that I know now have OCD. Hadn't talked about it before.
Same with me and my family. Yeah.
So it kind of it opens the door for people to seek help. I think is really important. Hopefully, if somebody's listening, a new mum. Perinatal OCD is brutal because you're caring for this tiny new baby, and I can remember thinking, like, I'd made these bottles, and then I'd think, but did you put salt in there? Absolutely didn't even have any in the house. But the thought was there. I'd empty them all
down
out
the drain.
And I'd start again. And it's just kind of...
I mean, that's something so mundane as making a bottle, and but it turns into this thing where it's exhausting. You've got to go to the shop, and then that train of thought, like you're knackered anyway. You're a new mum. You can opt to sleep in, and then
it comes back to, why did I think that?
Yeah.
Why did I think that? Is that something that's already in my head? I can't stress enough. It's not. And that's the most important part. If anybody's listening and they've had anything like what we're talking about, is to know that a lot of people don't know what OCD is because of social media, obsessive Christmas disorder. Do us a favour. I'd love to have an obsession about Christmas tree ornaments and tins of beans. Do you know what I mean? Give us it. I'll take it gladly.
I don't know how you feel about this. It used to really wind me up, and it was when I was first diagnosed, because you know, when you realize the gravity of it, and you know, and then people are like being so trivial about it, and I'm so OCD, like you say, you should see me house, or blah blah blah, and it used to really wind us up. I used to think, you've got no idea how inconsiderate. And now I'm like, these people don't really get it, and they don't understand. Yeah, they're not doing it out of malice. You know, and then I sometimes pick me time's not the right time to bring it up, but I'll be like, do you know, do you actually want to know a little bit about OCD? And then I'll tell them, and I'm like, you know, as someone who suffers and struggles with it, because I am going to use those words because it's absolutely the right descriptive words. This is what it's about, and this is what it isn't. And then, you know, you're just passing on that education. But like you say, the more we talk about, and this has been a big thing for me, and I'm so pleased you've come on to talk about it, because I still, like I say, I go out and talk about mental health as a job now. You know, and the irony of that, where I've kept things to myself for so long, it's not lost on us that I do it for a living, but I still can't bring OCD into and I'm thinking about it all the time. How can I bring it in? Because there's still that fear that people are going to look at me and go, who is this bloke? Like, what, you know? But
there's such a good chance that there's somebody else in that room.
And that's what I've got to remind myself, that for the sort of greater good, that if there's just one person listening that goes, oh, that is me and I'm struggling at the minute. And then we go, look, let's get some help. And that's what it's all about.
I think, like with me, I think one of the most distressing times for me was after I lost my brother, and that probably has a lot to do with my health OCD. So people can say, "Oh, that'll not happen. It's a young person. It doesn't happen." It does happen, and it's happened to me. Lots of like really traumatic events have happened.
That's your brother Neil. How old was Neil when he?
32. So he was just kind of getting ready to go on a night out and collapsed in the bathroom, and there was nobody at home. So you have a cardiac arrest and there's nobody there. There is no chance that he was going to survive. But I think that's now, in fact, I'm 100% sure that's kind of strengthened the health OCD. Well, if it happened to him, it could happen to you.
But you're not talking about it now. It's understandable, that, isn't it?
It is understandable.
It's absolutely understandable that would drive those anxious thoughts and that feeling. You know, you've got a family, you're a mother. There's a lot of people, you know, depending on you, where you're thinking, gosh, if something happened to me like that, and you've seen sort of how that manifested with the family and the kids, and you think, especially if that's how your sort of brains are tuned to be in that anxious state and that, you know, that thought process, I totally get how that would.
Do you know what? That's just come to me there. So recently, before I moved up here, when my wife would come up here to visit family, most of the time I'd always be with her, Mia and the kids, and we'd pretty much do everything together. But every now and again I might be busy at work, or I'd have something on, or whatever it might be, and she'd come up with the kids on her own. And that is when I would have thoughts that I did struggle to get out of my mind. Driving down the motorway in the rain with my kids, and I'd see the newspaper clippings, young mum, 3 children dying, motor incident, clash, and that this is a time when I'm just listening to you guys there, when those thoughts had come, and I know the thoughts, but I did struggle to move them on. And I'd have to make the phone call, and I'd have to double check, and I couldn't shift them on quite so easily, even though I knew it was a thought that just came to me there. It's that's a mad things that you care about,
and how someone, that's perfectly normal. The things that you care about most, and how that might manifest with somebody with OCD is they would probably stop the journey, stop seeing people. Won't let all the family go in the car. You start sort of putting things.
I can see that. Yeah, that's feeling how you would then put safety measures in and just restrict everything, and then it just mutate into a completely debilitating.
Like I've done a lot of research on OCD now, and I've read this. I've seen this interview actually with this guy that he was absolutely obsessed. He was going to kill his wife because he was having like these intrusive thoughts, and then he would just his house was just completely bare, and he would lock himself in, and he wouldn't let her come and see him, and they were just. He was having these graphic intrusive thoughts, and he was overcome by them, and then he's obviously done a lot of work and a lot of therapy, and he's a OCD sort of awareness advocate now, but you can still see it in his eyes when he talks about it, how terrifying it was at that time. And something else I learned when I was doing a lot of research about it is there's a big link between undiagnosed ADHD in children and OCD in adults. Yeah. And I totally get that. I do too. And I get that sort of thought process, the way the brain works, and then obviously from my lived experience as well.
I must admit, everybody who I know not everybody, 99% of the people who I've met who have OCD are neurodiverse.
Wow.
So, I don't know. I mean, I certainly am. I mean, I'm not diagnosed autistic or anything like that, ADHD, but I would nail a diagnosis if I explored that properly. I just haven't, because I haven't got time. And I am what I am, and I kind of I've done the research myself, and I know how everything works.
Of dealing with it as well, isn't it? To sort of.
I mean, that's not to diminish for anyone listening. The power of diagnosis, because like you say, diagnosis has changed our lives in many respects. Yeah. I just wanted to sort of go back to that thing about Neil and losing Neil. Obviously we're from the same area, and I felt that impact as a community. It was horrific. We're still feeling it now, and I used to take part in the five-a-side football matches, and then you had an idea to start this charity, North East Hearts with Goals, to raise funds for defibrillators into local community centres, sports clubs, near pubs, but you name it. You just had this idea. And I remember, do you remember this when you came into the pub that day and I was stood with Peter and you just started fundraising, going around raising funds. I was in the pub with my mate Peter Harrison, who I'm having a few beers, and how things happen in your life, right? Yeah. How just things happen. And I'd literally just went in, probably on my second beer, and he was telling us how he's doing the Great North Swim. And he was a really strong swimmer, and I really was. I hadn't swum for years. And he's like, "Oh, will you do it?" And you're like, "Yeah, I'll do it. Yeah." And I turn around, Christine walked through, I'm like, "You all right?" And she goes, "Well, what are you on about?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm going to do the Great North Swim." And she's like, "Fancy doing it for charity?" "Do it for me." And I was like, "Yeah." And Peter was like, "Yeah, absolutely." And then the next day I woke up, he made a Facebook page about it, and I was like, "Oh, no." Right? Do you know when you talk yourself into things?
Get training.
But we did it, didn't we? It was absolutely incredible. It was really got behind it. A few of us done the swim. It was a fantastic day out, and you raised, I can't remember how much money was raised. I think you placed something like 8 or 9 defibs on the back of it. It was thousands. Because me... I think it was 9,000 or something. They were like $1,000 a piece at the time.
That was my first big fundraiser. They kind of... Awesome. But like I say, because we're such a close-knit community, everybody got behind it. Yeah. But then... It's funny though, because I love doing defibrillators and things like that, but OCD also impacts that, because then I'll think, did I check that properly before I put it back in the box? And I'll go home and think, you don't need to go back. You did it properly. You don't need to go back and check it. Like constant looking for reassurance that I haven't done something wrong.
Yeah.
But like you say, I just have to I'm at a stage now where I can cut it off and think, no, you did do it properly. You don't need to go back.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think, shall I take a video of myself doing it so I can play it back?
That's feeding it though, isn't it? As well.
Yeah, it's feeding it.
That's going into feeding it and giving that. So how it was explained to me is, you're giving these thoughts sort of meaning and purpose by some of the things you would do, like that. If you were videoing it means that you could actually have done it wrong, and then
the more attention you pay in, the more real it becomes,
and the worse it gets.
Yeah.
And that's, somebody saying to you, oh, well, they just thoughts, don't have them, and you're like, oh yeah, wish it was that easy.
Wish I'd known that 28 years ago.
Yeah.
God, yeah.
But so going back to the defib thing, I think there was somebody used one of those defibs that you put in out of that event, but you were saying there's been 50 cases where they've been activated and saved someone's life.
To be honest, it'll be way more than that. We don't find out about all of them, but the ones that we know of, and they're usually not to scare anybody, but it's usually people who've been exercising.
Oh really?
Yeah, usually male.
Is it a certain age bracket?
No, not really. We've had people in their 40s playing five-a-side, people in their 50s playing badminton, after running. So yeah, that's kind of, from our charity's perspective, they're the kind of people who...
There was a thought popped into my head there, and I was going to ask you if you've seen an increase after COVID, but I don't think I'm going to go down. That was
exactly going in my mind as well. But
we just had a little chat about that, didn't we? Before
in a safe space.
I don't know if I want to open that jar of worms, but
it's definitely a different kettle of fish, isn't it?
But there were, you're nodding your head, so there was an increase. Yeah.
We've seen, and I mean, obviously we try and read up on as much as we can, and that there's a lot of research going into it at the moment.
I mean, this isn't saying about vaccines or anything. This is about COVID. Like,
COVID's caused
exacerbated people's health, underlying health things that maybe would have never have come to the fore. Yeah. But because of COVID, people find themselves hospitalised.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's
taken that toll, I think, on people's bodies
and mental health.
And mental health.
OCD since COVID. Gosh, I mean, you can obviously understand.
What I've been thinking is listening to you guys talk and trying to think about what is the origin of OCD and what is that, and you're both talking about sort of reassurance and. With your story in particular, Ray, about being a kiddie and your mum and dad splitting up and sort of where do you belong and all of that, and is it attached to that, and is that a common theme? But certainly with the COVID thing, that's what happened, wasn't it? We just destroyed trust. We destroyed our sense of togetherness in a way, didn't we? We isolated, and then I don't know, that sense of being isolated from the group or feeling like you're dangerous in some way. Oh, that's a tricky one. Is there a history for you, Christine? What was it like for you as a child? You mentioned you were a kid and you remember flushing a chain and getting in bed. Was home life good for you, like mum and dad and everything?
Perfect.
Yeah.
Honestly, nothing.
See.
I can't...
Blows a hole in what I'm thinking then.
Yeah, no. Happy childhood. Mm-hmm. Nothing that was kind of out of the norm.
Yeah. Just isn't.
I think traumatic events can bring it on, but there's so many cases you'll read where there's no indicator where people have...
It's just a mind working how it works.
It's the same, like you say, it's anxiety disorders. People experiencing anxiety out there that can't, there's not... one definitive factor in the life that is it genetics, is it sort of epigenetics, is it just your wiring, like you say, is it's got to be a chemical imbalance as well, because there's things from a chemical perspective like alcohol and drugs and caffeine and whatnot, anything that stimulants and whatnot, they can really exacerbate OCD.
Which, I mean, I haven't had a drink for 18 years.
Wow.
And I like to be in control, and it's linked. It's 100% linked. Yeah. I like to be in control of my actions all of the time. And when you're You know, I've had my days of kicking my height and being mortal and being on the rave scene and things like that. But now it doesn't work for me. I need to have that control. And plus, with having Reilly, it's at home. I can't go in and have raging hangovers the next day because it's just not possible.
No.
So yeah.
Just on Reilly. So that the blog that you started was that just born out of getting things out of your head, putting them onto paper and just making sense of some of the stuff that was happening, because Reilly's non-verbal autistic, isn't he?
Yeah, it's a pure frustration of people not understanding the situation that Reilly's in, but also us as his parents, because it's really stressful. And you know, people worry about their kids. They worry, are they going to get a job? Will they get married? Will they have their own place? When you have a child like Reilly, those fears are like 100-fold. Like, I don't know that he's going to live independently, and it's a constant what happens when we're gone. And this is also plays into the health OCD. I can't die because I have to be here for him, but there's going to be a point where I'm not, and what happens then? And I spend so much time thinking about it, I can't even begin to explain. But that's not just me. That's
I bet that's very
every
common.
parent
A reflection of someone in that situation.
Yes,
Totally,
so it's really difficult. But what I find the hardest is I see OCD traits in Reilly, and I mean, we're talking about genetics, and I think they go hand in hand. OCD is a comorbid condition with autism. So, and I do see he does things in twos, everything. I can't buy one bottle of pop, it has to be two. And if I don't do two, then well, I just never don't do two because I have to, because it brings so much distress to him.
And you wonder where that thoughts come from, because in his mind, if there's not that, it's not that he just wants two. It's that something probably could happen, or it's
exactly.
taking him,
and he can't talk about it. And it breaks
difficult.
my heart to think that he's in a position that I've been in, and that he's not going to have that. I mean, he communicates well for being autistic. He spells perfectly. You know, like he's put his brother to shame, who's years older in certain circumstances. But yeah, it's. I don't know what I do with. How do I even deal with that thought that Reilly could be in the same position without being able to talk like we are about it, and to truly understand what's happening himself?
So here's a bit of a curveball. I've been listening to a podcast series lately called The Telepathy Tapes.
I've heard about it, but I haven't listened to it yet.
Oh, well, listeners, and I've spoke to you, Ray, this week about it, and listening to you talking about Reilly and being non-verbal. So essentially, in a nutshell, the research is that autistic kids and non-verbal kids having a telepathy and an ability to communicate with predominantly the mother, and the mum learning a way of communicating back. And literally, I mean, they've done examples of, this particular research crew are there, and they say, look, this is what's happening in the family in Mexico. This, it's wild. She's, like you just mentioned about Reilly, they're very bright, very good, communicating with the writing, and insane, and he'd draw a picture that the mum had told the research team, this is, and it's 100% accuracy. And then these families are popping up everywhere, and they all similarly haven't spoken to anyone about it because it just seems far too far out. It seems far too crazy. No one's going to listen. And then there's been a tipping point now, and it seems to be that there's something there. And in some of the specialist schools, carers and teachers have acquired a skill to be able to communicate as well, which has been wild. So it might really be interesting to listen to.
Yeah, I'll check it out for sure.
The telepathy tapes, wild, really wild.
Well, the sensors are an incredible thing, isn't it? When with anybody, they have a heightened level on other planes, don't they? If one is restricted or taken away. So it's
my wife's partially deaf, and my God, she can smell. If I spray an aftershave like 2 floors away from her.
Oh, you smell nice, Sammy.
Where you going?
So, bringing it back to the Northeast with your Northeast wife. 2 questions that we ask everybody that come on the podcast. grown up in a little mining community where everyone's hard as nails. We all know that. And as for our grow boys, it would have been a thing back in the day. The reason that we started this podcast is because, you know, we started working in the I don't want to say the mental health field, but and you start looking at things, you know, start looking at statistics and whatnot, and then you realise, wow, the Northeast's got the highest sort of levels of suicide in the UK, and some of the worst mental health conditions and waiting lists and all this jazz. And that just didn't really compute with me at first, because I'm thinking, you know, we all love a laugh, everyone. And then you start digging in and you think, oh, actually, maybe, there's something in that, because I didn't talk. Yeah. And there was a reason that I didn't talk, and it's maybe a cultural thing. But why do you think this region, the Northeast, is struggling so badly with the mental health and the suicide rates?
Because I think in the Northeast, men are like gadgies, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's a well-known fact that men don't like talking about their mental health. Like my husband, Shane, we set up
a lovely human being, by the way.
He now runs a group for dads of autistic children, because these dads are really struggling, and there wasn't any help groups, there wasn't anything. He needed someone to talk to, they needed someone to talk to. We actually run it from the Meadows, in the Meadow Well.
And that's just fundamental, isn't it? Like, how many people are in that position where they're struggling with something, and it's like, oh, I just need somebody to talk to, and then he's just went, right, let's put it out there, let's create this thing, let's start a group, connection, community, boom.
Yeah. So I do mums and grandparents, and he does dads.
Fabulous.
And it just kind of gives you a space like this to just sit down and talk about it, look for solutions together, troubleshoot things, support each other, talk about, you know, like somebody maybe getting help from one service that you've never even heard of. And it works really, really well. But yeah, I think it comes back to being a gadget.
I mean, don't get us wrong, the rate amongst men are particularly worrying in the Northeast.
Absolutely, yeah.
We have had other discussions on the podcast about, you know, the roots in the Northeast where it's all been built on really hard industry. We're from a mining community, and then people, when they shut the mines, they went in, it seemed to all go into construction, or you know, and then you shipbuilding and you're fishing and all that. And then there's a big drink culture here as well. And I just think, as much as Geordies love talking and they love having the crack and the jokes, we don't talk about the right things.
Yeah. Well, I've never, my dad's 80 this year.
Another wonderful human being, by the way. Yeah.
And I'd never seen him never cried, certainly ever, when I was growing up, until we lost my brother. It's the first time I've ever seen him cry. And they can't have gone through life without having problems and stuff, but I never saw it. And I think that's part of we just need people to be a bit more open. My lads, I think it's changing. Yeah. Like my lads, they can come to me with anything, and are completely, like Ellis was in London for the match, came back and hasn't been very well since he came back. And my first question was, because he had nosebleeds and stuff like that, have you been on a gear? And he was like, no, I haven't. I would tell you if I had tried it, I would tell you. And that's the type of relationship we've got.
With you being open about your mental health struggles, that's probably created that space. Yeah. You know, and that's what this is about. Like, I want my boys, because life's going to happen to everyone, if they're struggling with something, go, you know what, I am going to talk to my dad because he gets it. Yeah. And I'll sit there with this empathetic, sympathetic ear, and I'll be like, listen, boy, this is normal. Yeah. And we can ask for help and we can get help, and let's do it. And
that's what we haven't got currently. We haven't got that. And I think nothing would faze. My lads could come to me with anything and it wouldn't faze us, mental health wise. Nothing. I would just be like, right, what are we going to do?
Just over the moon that you're having the conversation. Yeah. Because like listening to you today, Christine, like knowing, and we do in the work, like you just know everybody's got a battle behind the eyes, in the heart, that whatever it is, whether it's neurodiversity or bereavement or just health or childhood, whatever it is, and knowing you've got that open line of communication, and that once you open that channel, the relief, just listen to you talk about the groups there and your husband, thinking about your husband, and like what a relief it must be to just have a load of other fellas who are in your life, you know, living that same life, trying to get the bills paid, trying to provide, trying to learn about their own son, all of the different emotions, and then to be able to just share it, just to talk, hopefully, which is what people are getting from listening to this.
It's a hard area to crack though. Like we're people travel in to come to the groups, but initially it was set up in the Meadows because it's funded from the Mental Health Alliance, and the Meadows kind of took it in, and this area, like you say, North Shields, trying to get people to come out and say I'm struggling is really difficult. But we're trying. We're trying.
That's all you can do. You just create a space, can't you? And just hope they come. Yeah. And we might have sort of answered the next question in a roundabout way, but to sort of round off the chat is for anyone listening, what would be your one key bit of advice that has helped you with your mental health and your well-being over the years?
Talking about it is the most important thing. Medication, don't be scared to take it because it really does help. Or it helped me. And I can't see myself without it now because I think I am the way that I am. And if something's going to help, I'll take that help regardless of what it is, if that makes sense.
So talking, accepting help.
Accepting help, yeah. As far as OCD is concerned, ERP, exposure response prevention is I would say the gold ticket therapy for OCD.
And if anybody's listening that thinks, oh my gosh, that's what I've been experiencing, is to do some research. Go out and raise that fact with your doctor. And if you've been keeping it a secret out of shame or guilt or fear, really opening up and getting that diagnosis and understanding why it's happening, you're having these thoughts and what can trigger it is life-changing. I can say that with absolute certainty.
Because I mean, you'll have noticed yourself that there's groups for everything. There's groups for autistic dads. We've just been talking about them. I don't see any groups for OCD.
No.
And I've never seen one.
Oh, wow, that's interesting.
Let's start one.
Happily, because I know for a fact that it'll change people's lives, may even save people's lives.
Yeah.
Well, that's probably for another time because we...
what a tip to end on. Thank
absolutely.
you so much, Christine. Appreciate
Christine,
it.
so buzzing to have you on. Thank you so much. Been an amazing conversation. Where might people find some of the stuff we've talked about if they want to find out about Northeast Hearts with Goals, if they want to find out about the Life of Reilly stuff you've done?
So Facebook's probably the best place to find, and we're active on those every day. So the Life of Reilly is literally the Life of Reilly, Irish spelling REILLY.
Shane had something to do with that, didn't he?
Yes, yeah. And then Hearts with Goals is Northeast Hearts with Goals, and they're both on social media. They both have their own websites with the same names.
Amazing.
Big love, Christine.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time, Christine.
And everything he's doing as well. And thank you so much for coming on.
Awesome.
Keep up the good work.
Peace and love.
Big love.